There are moments when the truth is undeniable. It stands there quietly, unmoved, uncomplicated. And still, it is refused. Not because it is unclear, not because it lacks evidence, but because accepting it would rearrange something inside. You have seen it. Perhaps you have felt it. A conversation where facts hang in the air, yet the other person turns away. A relationship that is clearly broken, yet one heart insists it is whole. A pattern repeated so often it becomes visible, and still it is defended. Truth is not always rejected for being false. Sometimes it is rejected for being threatening. Because truth does not only inform, it transforms. And transformation asks for the surrender of something familiar. Truth often arrives gently, not with shouts, not with spectacle. It slips into awareness like a quiet shadow across familiar ground. And yet, sometimes, the moment it touches a person, it is met with resistance. Resistance is rarely conscious at first. It is not loud rebellion. It is hesitation, a pause in the breath, the subtle folding inward of thought. A mind that senses imbalance before it can name it. The sensation is familiar, a faint tightening in the chest, a slight retreat behind words, a small but persistent urge to look away. Facts, clear and undeniable, hover in the air, but they are unclaimed. The mind, the heart, the self, each flinches. This is denial. Not always dramatic, not always intentional. It is a quiet defense. The first encounter with difficult truth often triggers a shadow of discomfort. Something in identity feels challenged. Something in the familiar feels unsafe. Accepting what is real sometimes demands surrendering stories that have always made life comprehensible. Perhaps it is a relationship pattern that must be acknowledged, a mistake that must be faced, a belief that no longer aligns with reality. Each truth carries a weight beyond mere fact, a challenge to comfort, to narrative, to self-perception. And yet, the mind searches for ways to soften it, to push it aside, to reinterpret it. Sometimes the denial is subtle. Words are acknowledged but minimized. Ideas are considered but reframed. Conclusions are deferred. This hesitation is protective. The psyche knows the cost of immediate acceptance. Accepting reality may require shame, remorse, vulnerability, or change. Change is threatening. The mind's first instinct is to guard the familiar. Even when confronted with evidence, the self instinctively negotiates. Logic may speak clearly, but emotion whispers a different story. I cannot handle this yet. This feels unsafe. I am not ready to be reshaped. Denial, then, is not necessarily stubbornness. It is a pause, a buffer between confrontation and integration. It is the mind's way of saying without words that it needs time to adjust, to protect the fragile equilibrium of identity and comfort. It is here, in this moment, that human complexity becomes visible. You see the delicate balance between perception, emotion, and ego, between what is true and what feels survivable. The first flinch at truth is also the first invitation to awareness, to notice the mechanisms that protect, the patterns that preserve, and the internal cost of avoidance. Because every small act of denial carries energy, not violent or loud energy, but quiet, persistent consumption, attention, focus, and emotional bandwidth slowly diverted to maintain a story rather than embrace reality. And as subtle as it is, this moment marks the beginning of a pattern that may extend into relationships, decisions, and self-perception. The mind resists not to deceive others, but to preserve itself. And understanding that gentle instinct is the first step toward seeing clearly. Avoidance is subtle. It does not announce itself with fanfare. It creeps into conversation, into decision-making, into the spaces between words and intentions. When truth is refused, life does not stop. It continues around the denial, but the consequences accumulate quietly, invisibly, like sediment in a riverbed. One cost is internal. Every time reality is denied, the self bends to preserve comfort. Thoughts are redirected, feelings are suppressed, insight is postponed. The mind loses clarity, not abruptly, but gradually. Each avoidance deepens patterns of rationalization. Each rationalization thickens the shield against reality. Another cost is relational. Denial is contagious in its own way. When one person avoids truth, interactions become skewed. Conversations circle, issues remain unresolved, misunderstandings multiply. Subtle tensions persist, and the emotional landscape becomes crowded with unspoken dissonance. Trust, the quiet binding of human connection, erodes when facts are consistently left unacknowledged. There is also the erosion of authenticity. When denial dominates, people inhabit narratives that are not fully theirs. They act, speak, and make choices in alignment with illusions rather than reality. This creates distance, not externally obvious, but deeply felt. A sense of dissonance emerges. Life does not feel fully lived, even when it appears orderly. The nervous system registers these patterns. Chronic avoidance produces tension, subtle anxiety, and fatigue. The mind is always negotiating between what it knows and what it refuses to accept. Even small discrepancies between truth and action consume energy. Over time, the body learns to anticipate discomfort, and vigilance becomes habitual. Opportunities for growth diminish. Decisions are deferred or misguided. Lessons that could arise from engagement with reality are lost, leaving cycles of repetition. People remain in patterns that no longer serve them simply because the cost of facing truth seems higher than the cost of postponement. Avoidance also diminishes emotional resilience. Each evasion is a quiet surrender. The self signals that it cannot withstand the discomfort of reality. Over time, the psyche grows accustomed to protecting itself rather than expanding capacity. Courage is not extinguished, but dulled. Even relationships bear the weight of avoidance. When one denies what is clear, others may compensate, adjust, or conform. Subtle imbalances emerge. One carries the emotional labor of awareness, while the other retreats into comfort. Over years, the pattern creates quiet frustration, alienation, and sometimes betrayal. Not intentional, but inevitable. Yet awareness of these costs can be illuminating. Recognition is not blame, it is observation. Seeing the cumulative impact of avoidance creates the possibility of choice, to continue the familiar path or to begin the delicate process of alignment with reality. Because the truth remains, it does not vanish. It waits patiently, quietly, like a river flowing beneath ice, persistent and unyielding. And slowly, with observation, the weight of avoidance becomes undeniable. The cost is no longer abstract, it is tangible in fatigue, tension, stagnation, and subtle loss of self. This is the turning point, the point where awareness creates discomfort so vivid it can no longer be ignored. The mind begins to sense that resistance is no longer protective, but limiting, that preservation has transformed into quiet erosion. And from this tension, the first seeds of courage emerge. Courage is rarely loud. It does not burst forth like a flame. It arrives slowly, almost imperceptibly, as the mind hesitates, as the heart softens, as the body stops bracing against the inevitable. The first act of courage is noticing, seeing the patterns that once went unexamined, recognizing the ways denial has shaped thought, choice, and relationships, feeling, without judgment, the quiet tension that arises when reality touches familiar narratives. Humility is the companion of courage. To face truth requires the admission that previous understanding was incomplete, that certainty was at times comforting illusion, that control is always partial. Humility allows the mind to pause, to listen, to accept without collapsing into shame. Psychologically, this is regulation in practice. The nervous system, once tuned to self-protection, begins to recalibrate. The amygdala's alarm softens. The prefrontal cortex, previously overshadowed by defensive reflex, gains space to interpret and integrate information. Insight is no longer rushed, no longer forced, but allowed. The courage to see also involves tolerating discomfort. Truth often brings tension, embarrassment, loss, responsibility, or the need to change. Facing reality without reaction requires observing emotion rather than fleeing from it. It's a form of internal steadiness, a willingness to hold tension without becoming unmoored. Empathy plays a subtle role here too. Understanding one's own avoidance allows recognition that others' denial may follow the same protective logic. Courage to see is not only personal, it is relational. It is observing reality clearly while maintaining compassion for self and others. Flexibility emerges gradually. The mind experiments with alignment, testing old beliefs against new evidence. Some truths are integrated easily, others require repeated reflection. The process is iterative. Each small acceptance strengthens resilience. Each rationalization thickens the shield against reality. Patterns that once dictated automatic denial become choices instead. Responses to evidence are no longer reflexive. Hesitation is no longer fear-driven. The mind and heart begin to work together, allowing discernment rather than avoidance. Courage is not perfection, it is persistence. Small decisions to acknowledge reality accumulate, reshaping internal landscapes. The self gains confidence not from certainty, but from the willingness to tolerate ambiguity and contradiction. Even when discomfort persists, it is no longer paralytic. Awareness and regulation coexist. The individual can witness complexity without dissolving into denial. Energy that was once diverted to maintaining illusions now shifts towards understanding, adaptation, and clarity. Relationships also shift. Once truth is tolerated, interactions become less defensive. Misunderstandings are addressed with openness rather than suppression. Conversations carry less subtle tension. Distance, when necessary, is chosen deliberately rather than forced by internal resistance. And in this process, something essential emerges, a recognition that reality is not the enemy. It is a landscape to navigate, not a threat to endure. Courage allows engagement with life on its own terms, without unnecessary filtering or distortion. The quiet strength of seeing, then, is the foundation of liberation. It is the turning point where avoidance no longer dominates, where the mind, the heart, and the body align towards clarity, where truth, once threatening, becomes a partner in growth rather than an adversary. Truth, when finally seen, does not always roar. It can arrive like morning light through a thin curtain, subtle yet undeniable. And in that light, something shifts, not violently, not in dramatic gestures, but quietly, irrevocably. The first sensation is relief. Relief that the mind no longer needs to navigate layers of resistance. Relief that energy once devoted to denial can flow freely. Relief that tension can ease because the world has been faced rather than avoided. There is also tenderness toward oneself, for the courage it took to see, toward others for the patterns they followed in their own protection. Understanding blooms naturally from recognition, and compassion deepens in proportion to awareness. Freedom is not chaos, it is coherence. The self, once fragmented between reality and avoidance, begins to settle. Decisions feel lighter because they are informed by clarity rather than distortion. Choices feel steadier because they are aligned with understanding rather than habit. Relationships transform too. Some deepen, enriched by honesty and mutual acknowledgement. Some thin, not by violence but by natural alignment, where connection requires reciprocity and respect rather than distortion and energy-draining resistance. The liberation of truth is also subtle in daily life. Conversations require less vigilance. Interactions carry less tension. Internal dialogue softens, no longer policing every thought for safety. The nervous system, long braced against perceived threat, begins to relax, allowing presence and attentiveness that were previously inaccessible. There is a poetic rhythm in this liberation, a quiet ebb and flow of consciousness.
Truth does not dominate, it integrates. It moves gently into the spaces once occupied by avoidance. It restores simplicity to thought, steadiness to emotion, and integrity to action. Yet freedom is not a final state. It is a practice, a continuous engagement with reality tempered by discernment and compassion. Each moment offers a choice: to see clearly, to feel fully, to respond with openness rather than automatic defense. And in these moments, life feels fuller. Not because every challenge disappears, but because each challenge can now be met without the weight of unnecessary denial. Each truth